welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the Canadian MLS teams of the start of the season, and also the new rule that's been adopted for the Canadian Premier League. But first, here's your fixtures rundown. In the She Believes Cup, Canada defeats Colombia 4-1. And in Major League Soccer, Club de Foot Montreal gets defeated by Chicago Fire 3-0. And Vancouver Whitecaps defeats Toronto FC 3-0. So, as the Major League Soccer season starts their year in 2026, our thoughts, I think a lot of fans will be thinking about the Whitecaps. They're doing really well. They're right now in those top level. Again, they're trying to do their redemption to go back into the finals in the MLS Cup. But as Club de Foot Montreal and Toronto FC stay in the bottom positions. As Toronto FC right now playing 2 games, their first 2 games has not even scored a point, including Club de Foot Montreal, including not making any points for their first 2 games. So right now, it's an early decision of Toronto FC and Club de Foot Montreal. Right now, I see Club de Foot Montreal fans are not really happy for their start of the 2026 season. Toronto FC, I would give them some time for Toronto FC to get things running. But looking at Club de Foot Montreal, again struggling in Major League Soccer, is something that, again, you're going to get angry fans from last season not bringing in the quality players, the coach that they wanted that could help the team get ready to score goals and to win games. I look at it saying there might be a time that Club de Foot Montreal is in this panic mode. But again, for the Club de Foot Montreal fans, right now it's too early to call for that, to make a message and say we're tired of losing games. It's too early of the season to call it in. But if it's the first 5 games, maybe so. Or 8 games or 10 games. But right now, the first 2 games or 3 games can't be just going out berserk and being mad right now. Right now, Club de Foot Montreal will be playing the Canadian Championship against Calgary Blizzard, and you'll be thinking, oh, if Club de Foot Montreal loses to Calgary Blizzard in the Canadian Championship in the first round, I would have to say that is one biggest disaster for Club de Foot Montreal in this season. So I would get that. Club de Foot Montreal is having not a great time with the owners. And when you think that will go all the time, there might be changes in the future. Now you look at Toronto FC. Also, you have fans getting upset, questioning of signings, if their strikers are the right piece to play for Toronto FC to win games. There's a lot of players that they signed, and some of them you might think of, they might be good for Toronto FC, but did not show its quality against Vancouver Whitecaps. So if you look at, again, I look at Club de Foot Montreal, Toronto FC, Vancouver Whitecaps, of how they're going to perform in the Canadian Championship, I would have to say that they might do really well. I kind of predict that Toronto FC could do very well to make it to the finals against Vancouver Whitecaps. I kind of predict that Club de Foot Montreal will be versing Vancouver Whitecaps in the Canadian Championship, but fall short against them. So when we see that in the mix, you also have Canadian Premier League teams. A lot of that is now being shown, the news in the Canadian Premier League, that there is a new rule that's being in place, that the new offside rule will be adopted and tested in the 2026 season for the Canadian Premier League. And a lot of people are really mixed about this new rule for the offside rule coming in for the Canadian Premier League. And it's really kind of to this point that the referees are going to kind of question what is considered offside, what is considered in onside. So the new offside rule is that the whole player is offside from the whole person is offside of the player that is. If the player is still has the body just still on of the last player, it's still considered onside. Still, it's basically a lot to question. So a player will only be offside if he has fully passed the last defender. So it won't be decided based on a body part anymore. I don't know if the Canadian Premier League will basically keep this offside rule for the next seasons of 2027, 2028 of the Canadian Premier League. So if it's successful, I really would think that fans are going to be kind of having a hard time watching the Canadian Premier League. But again, if it's really successful for the fans' perspective, that they kind of agree with this new rule, that hey, we're kind of liking this. We're kind of liking the new rule of the offside. But but they all know the old offside rule, and I think that the new offside rule is, I think, kind of giving more players of an advantage at this point. I really don't think this rule is going to succeed to the next season of the Canadian Premier League. It's just what I think. But some news coming out. Inter Toronto FC. I know a lot of fans are reacting about Inter Toronto FC. A big announcement from Inter Toronto FC that they actually announced of their new structure of the player development structure, that Inter Toronto FC has 7 teams right now. So, as noticed, their first team, the Canadian Premier League, they announced that 3 teams will be playing in the Ontario Premier League, and also their under 13, 14, and 15 will be in the Ontario Development League. This is actually big for Inter Toronto FC, and it makes the other Canadian Premier League teams smaller, and it's an actual good pathway for the next generation to actually come in and to move up to the Canadian Premier League. So a lot of question for the Inter Toronto having 3 teams in the Ontario Premier League. I don't know how the 2026 season in the Ontario Premier League is going to look like. But again, they have not announced yet of how the season is going to start in the Ontario Premier League. So we'll see how Inter Toronto FC is going to become this small team to becoming the biggest team in the Canadian Premier League. In that case of Inter Toronto FC, looking back of the Canadian Premier League, how they performed in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, a lot of fans really kind of wanted to see Atletico Ottawa perform really well in this debut against Nashville SC. And I really have to say this, that their performance, I think a lot of fans will kind of agree or kind of disagree of Atletico's debut performance in the CONCACAF Champions Cup was really this poor performance. I would have to say that the midfielders were a great performance in the match, but the defensive and the offensively were not really good at all. That includes the goalkeeper that performed. So I really question how Atletico Ottawa will perform in the 2026 season. Some fans would kind of question how this 2026 season is going to go out for the Canadian Premier League season. And some fans don't really want to see Atletico Ottawa have this poor performance in the 2026 season. I really have to think, I think they're not going to be the top 3. I think Halifax Wanderers could actually be third place or even second. But it's a question right now. But could Inter Toronto be that top 3? Could be or not. Some people are saying that FC Supra could be that one. But being that debut team in the 2026 season, a lot of question marks lead to FC Supra right now. That, again, they might not have a good debut season for them, just like right now of Vancouver FC, how they performed in the CONCACAF Champions Cup against Cruz Azul. Probably not having a great season again. I think seeing some of the teams, I think Forge FC could still be the top 3 alongside with Calvary FC. But Atletico Ottawa, in my opinion, of how they're performing, they could be the team not being the regular season champs, but still making the playoffs. And again, you're looking at a team, Atletico Ottawa, that's going to be versing Toronto FC in the Canadian Championship. Atletico Ottawa needs to show their best, being this team that won the North Star Cup, beated Forge FC, that were the first place team. And you look at Calvary FC, that also beated Forge FC to not even make them go to the finals. Probably was the best performance in the 2025 Canadian Premier League. And you look at Atletico Ottawa and Calvary FC in the finals, was probably the best finals we ever had. But right now, when you look at the 2026 season, now there's some mixed reactions to this. That Atletico Ottawa, Forge FC, how they performed. Now looking at Sync, probably not going to be our best performance for the season. What I really think, I'm thinking back, we might not see a difference. We might not see a difference. We might see Forge or Atletico Ottawa being the top 2. But again, you have Halifax Wanderers. You have Calvary FC being those competitive teams. But again, a lot of people are looking at that number 5 team. Could be FC Supra du Québec, Inter Toronto FC, Pacific FC. There's a lot to look at. I think that the 5th team could be the competitive matchup right now for the 2026 season. But we have to wait until next month in April for the 2026 season of the Canadian Premier League. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. You could follow us on X, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.